Good morning, everyone. My name is Richard Wynne. I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing, Ares Systems Corporation. We're a peer review system vendor. We have about 6,000 journals that use our system. I'm going to engage on a thought experiment with you today. One of the first things they teach you in business school to analyze businesses is to ask yourself, what business are you in? So if I was to say to you, are scholarly publishers in the journal business, what would you say? Yeah, some people would say, like if you're an oil company, are you in the oil business? No, you're in the energy business, right? So a lot of people think that scholarly publishers are in the content business. And so to keep your attention, I've put this title up to tell you that you're actually not in the content business. So if you're not in the content business, what business are you in? Well, let's think about scholarly journals as assertion engines, as tools for creating and validating and publishing assertions. What kind of assertions am I talking about? Well, here's one. This content is worth reading. This content is novel. This content has not been plagiarized. This content has actually been through an editorial process. These are the authors, and this is where they work. The citations are accurate. The data support the results. No one was harmed in the creation of this manuscript. The supporting data are statistically coherent, well, maybe, and etc. So you can probably think of maybe 200, 300 assertions that come along with a scholarly manuscript. And historically, these assertions have been represented in format. So we haven't had to sort of state these assertions one by one when we publish a manuscript, because we stick them in a format that we recognize. And it's the format that communicates those assertions. And over time, the repeated use of that format and the repeated success of your assertions translates to brand. So that's like a shorthand way of saying, well, it's published by XYZ Society, therefore implied are these 300 assertions that I'm comfortable with. The game's up, though. We've been doing this for 350 years. Format is no longer good enough for communicating assertions. The assertion business is changing, and it's changing fast. So our monopoly on format that we used to have because of print and other things is disappeared. Anyone can format a manuscript in a way that looks like a real manuscript and publish it, or put it out on the internet at least. Likewise, if we screw up in our assertions, these reviewers were not really the reviewers, these authors were not really the authors. Any mistakes we make in our assertions are going to be very quickly outed by services like Retraction Watch and be very damaging to our brand. So funders in particular are hungry for accurate and more granular assertions about what we do. Do you know how much funders spend each year on research? $1.6 trillion. I calculated it, that's $50,000 a second. That's how much they spend. In contrast, scholarly publishing is $10 billion approximately. So these guys have the money, and they want to know whether this money is being well spent. We're how they find that out. So it's not surprising that they want a little better information from us than this format that we've been using. They want to know that these assertions are accurate. And a part of that, of course, is that they want them to be machine readable to implement big data applications. And once again, format is a very poor way of making something machine readable. So as publishers, is this an opportunity or a threat? So we keep thinking about content workflow, but really we should start thinking about assertion workflow. So when an author submits a manuscript, they make certain assertions about that manuscript. I'm the author, these are my co-authors, this is the content, these are the statistical analysis. The journal validates some of those assertions, and then it maybe adds its own assertions. We put this through peer review. And then it sort of crystallizes those assertions in the published format. But creating assertions is not the same as creating content. So we have to rethink and retool our assertion workflow. And to do that, or to discuss that, I'm going to indulge in a semi-technical interlude, and I apologize to any of you who are technical experts or even non-novices here, but I always find it's useful to restate things. So I show you this word here, brown. What can you assert about this word? Is it a university, a name, a color? Well, let me put some format tags on it. I can now show this word in a browser as bold because the browser recognizes those tags and says, well, now I can present this as bold. And that's what we all know HTML does. It's a presentation format. It's not added any value in terms of the assertion that I can make about that word. All it's done is change the way I display it. Now, if I'm a human, I may see the word brown in a certain place, in a certain font, in a certain place on a page, and I might decide, well, that's really an author. But really, adding an HTML tag has not solved anything. So if I add these semantic tags, the author tags here, we probably know what brown is now. Brown is an author. But I could add other tags that also communicate that brown is an author. So if I'm a computer trying to read this, I really wouldn't know because I don't have a frame of reference for saying which tags should I be using. So that's why we have schema or DTD, which is like a dictionary of tags that we can all agree that this tag, contrib, is the one we're all going to use to identify a manuscript contributor. And that's where things like JATS come in. It's like a shared dictionary of tags. So now we've added a higher level of assertion. We now know that Brown is an author. So because we know that Brown is an author, we can use a style sheet or similar technology to say authors get presented in the user interface in a certain way, such as putting a bold tag on them and showing them as Brown. So if software could talk, the software would say, what's this text string? Oh, I see a semantic tag. It must be an author. Good. I know that Brown is an author, and therefore I'm going to present him in bold text. And then go on to the next piece of text. End of semi-technical interlude. So is XML just a fancy way of doing formatting, and a very expensive way? Well, a lot of publishers stop here. If you think of yourself as being in the content business, this is all you need out of XML. Do not go any further. But if you think of yourself as being in the assertion business, then maybe you care which Brown we're talking about. And of course, persistent identifiers, such as ORCID in this case, add a much higher level of assertion that I can make than I could before. So rethinking our assertion workflow, we can stick in an ORCID at the end of the process to the end user who's reading that. It's going to look exactly the same. The problem is if that was hand-keyed text on an offshore site by a composition vendor, there's no validity to that assertion, or not as much. So that's not where you want to make the assertion. You could do it in your editorial process, and again, that's a slightly higher level of assertion, but not good enough. And I've made the red X a bit smaller there because in some cases you actually have to do that practically. If an author's dead, they can't make their own assertion of their ORCID. But that's really what you want to do, is to use technology and APIs to have people self-assert so that that ORCID validation can take place, and you can put that into your XML. And then you can layer on, because you've now made a good assertion, you can layer on other assertions, like where does this author work? Well, maybe they work at Northeastern University in Shenyang, I think, in northern China, and that's where the Ringgold persistent ID comes in. So identifiers and taxonomies are essential for improving our assertions. Who did the research? ORCID. What did they do? Isn't this amazing? We've been publishing for 350 years. We've never really had a way of stating who did what on a manuscript. I mean, if I was spending $1.6 trillion a year, I'd be pretty upset that the industry that provides feedback to me gives me a list of 20 authors on a manuscript and never bothers to tell me the difference between the guy who just put his name on and the woman who really did all the work. So that's where the credit taxonomy comes in. And this is a very important taxonomy standard that allows you to identify what individual authors did. Who did they work for? Of course, the Ringgold ID. Who funded the research? The Open Funder Registry, formerly known as FundRef. And what did they cite? DOI. So that's where these standards, we don't want these standards for themselves. We want them because they allow us to assert things. There are other tools for improving assertions, like authenticate. This is not plagiarized. This content is novel. So more and more systems have tools built in to say, we've not seen this before, this is new. The citations are accurate. Again, our systems build in automatic citation checking and formatting to do that. This manuscript has been through some form of peer review. The PRE system from AAAS gives you a formal way to state the rounds of revision, the peer review that a manuscript has been through. We're working with a company called Meta to anticipate the likely citation impact on a manuscript. Again, this content is useful. And then assertions about the authors on this manuscript had these conflicts of interest or didn't have these conflicts of interest. You have systems like Convey coming out to solve that need, which would be totally impossible to integrate without some sort of persistent identifiers. So because you have good assertions, your content can now talk. You can do things with it. And one example of that is one of the workflows we have for allowing fee payment processing between a peer review system and the rights link payment system, where we're using persistent identifiers to communicate business rules or drivers for business rules. So, almost done here. So content wants to be free, and it's going to become harder and harder for us to charge for content. But I believe we can charge for assertions, and we can make a good case to our customers that assertions are expensive to create, and therefore they need to reward us for creating them. Creating assertions is not the same as creating format. So the people who were good at creating format are not necessarily the people who are going to be good at creating assertions. And I'm going to say that again. So creating assertions is not the same as creating format. Think assertion management system, not content management system. Use taxonomies and PIDs. And let's all think about ways that we can actually monetize assertions independently to the content. Thank you.